let me jump right into it. So we're going to talk about just run the gamut of all things preaching and anything else that you want to talk about. Feel free. This is Preaching and Preachers, and it's for preachers. It's for lay people. It's for people who are looking for ways to learn about preaching and the life of the church. Let me start this way. I've been seeing a rebirth of sorts. We're both old enough to see the rebirth of a lot of things.
You're right. You're right.
I've been seeing the rebirth of a focus on expository preaching. And I know enough about preaching to know that that term expository, it's wide. It can be almost mercurial and slip through your fingers in terms of a definition. How do you define expository preaching, and what are the mechanics of it? In other words, how is an expository sermon different than a narrative sermon? Or can you have a hybrid? And that was 3 questions in one.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Let's just start with defining expository preaching.
I think that's very difficult. I have 2 PhD students who are doing their dissertations on expository preaching. One is doing expository preaching and the prophetic preaching of Otis Moss Jr., because some of the stereotypes about expository preaching is it's weak in the prophetic and the social justice arena. So I have been trying to get them to define it for me. I then brought in a master expository preacher, Reverend Jeffrey Johnson of Eastern Star Baptist Church, and we threw it around and with the class and tossed it. We never could come to a definition. He then mentioned A. Lewis Patterson as an expository preacher, and then I said, well, what is A. Lewis Patterson's definition of expository preaching?
Nobody knows.
A. Lewis Patterson said, I just do it. I can't explain it.
I knew that.
That's a paraphrase. I heard Charlie Dates give a wonderful, and Jerry Carter to define it. So for me, Brian Carter invited me down to the E.K. Bailey Conference to preach this past July and assigned me a text. So, when you get assigned a text, you can't bring your horses, as we say. So everybody that preached for the conference wrote an original sermon. And the text he gave me was an Ephesians text, and I had to slip into an expository form. So because I'm narrative, right? And the text, if I followed the text, so my definition of expository preaching, and this is raw, nobody can hold me to it because I ain't found one that I can pin anybody else down to, that the order, the flow, the organization, the content of the sermon flows directly from the text. So with this Ephesians text, the only way I could approach that text was to ground it in the exegesis, to explain it. And so I struggled, but I thought I did a pretty good job, even though I tend to believe that no matter how you claim to be an expository preacher, your illustrations are always narrative.
Exactly.
Right.
And usually your clothes too.
Right. The clothes is narrative. Exactly. So it's really kind of an expository narrative form, as I understand it. And, go ahead. I see you waiting. Go ahead.
No, I'm, you're my guest. So I'm not going to go into my definitions. It would take at least 10 minutes for me to define for me, because I can define it.
Right.
It would take about 10 minutes for me to define expository preaching. And I think people are confused often by what it is. And more often what they are doing is a hybrid.
Right.
And they're not aware that they're doing the hybrid. And much of what we do as preachers, it's narrative informed. It's just narrative informed. And I think we need to be honest about that. But, there's so many ways to do expository preaching. You can approach it line by line. You can take 2 verses We've had preachers who said, I'm going to take a whole book and do it in an expository way. And so historically, it's just very difficult to do. But I've just seen this rise in interest again in expository preaching. What do you think that's about?
I think it has to do, I don't know, I have no research. This is just, anecdotal, as they say in the academic world, in the world. To me, it's a reaction against postmodernism and the uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty around the text. There's so much uncertainty around moral values. There's uncertainty around what truth is. So as best as I can see, this locking in on expository preaching and the meaning of the text, preaching the text, the flow of the text, the structure of the sermon, for me, ends up being a reaction back to a level of certainty in contradistinction to the vast levels of uncertainty that postmodernism has created. That's the only way that I think about it.
No, I think you're onto something. I think people think if someone is going line by line or word by word and just constantly calling up parts from the text, I think they think that they're being more biblical and authentic and true to the text. So no, I think you might have something there.
And I think it's also more certitude about the text. So when you get into biblical authority, which is what's the role of biblical authority? And at least from the expository preachers I've talked to in expository sermons, it seems that they have a much higher certitude about biblical authority.
Yes, you're right.
And so the social sciences and the rhetorical stuff, even though it's involved, you cannot not be rhetorical in any sermon.
Right.
But it's the authority of Scripture is fundamental in expository preaching.
Yeah.
And it can't be in some of the liberal interpretations of the text, that certitude is not quite what, I would call it. It would be searching the hermeneutics of suspicion, you move to those kind of phrases.
Or trying to just trace the steps of the divine.
Exactly.
And hoping that you're able to do that.
Right.
When you come upon a text and not, although you feel that the Bible's authoritative, you don't take an authoritative posture about what you know and are able to say God is saying in a text. Just wanted to, like I said, definitely get into that because I'm seeing such a rise of it in the last decade. So it's been just interesting to watch that, and who knows, at some point maybe you'll do an article on it.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm in dialogue. I have to tell you, I have 2 PhD students who are doing their. So one of the questions was, because I guess people know that I'm fairly on the liberal side of things, would I even admit, expository preachers into this program, to the PhD program? And I say, we cover all Black preaching. I don't have to agree. We cover all Black preaching. We might have some dissertations on some folk might not agree with, might not like, but we do all Black preaching.
That's right. That's right. I mean, because we're not a monolith.
Exactly.
I know they talk about us as a monolith, especially in academic circles. It's the Black church.
Right.
But our feet, as you and I both know, from having done a whole anthology on it, our styles are varied.
Exactly.
Our theology is certainly varied. Our approaches to text are certainly varied. So I definitely get that, and I'll be waiting to see their definitions, and hopefully they will publish something that adds to the field. Let's move on and I want to ask you rather about some preaching preparation steps. So many of our preachers now are bivocational. And that drill of, you got another Sunday. It's, it was Monday, and then the next day it's already Sunday. So, that drill. So tell me a bit about ways that bivocational senior pastors can prepare better. Maybe you can give me some commentaries, Old Testament, New Testament, preaching resources that can help people do a good job, a solid job on a text with less time.
Well, let me take the commentaries part first and tell your listeners that I sent you a selected bibliography.
Okay.
That includes preaching magazines, preaching related websites and blogs, a whole list of commentaries.
Okay, you emailed that to me already.
Yes, journals,
okay.
And a bibliography of African American preaching. So all that's coming. So,
oh my goodness,
they can get that from you, and I share that freely. I just want folks to know that whenever you get a bibliography, it's already old because people got stuff in the pipeline.
That's right.
So I think that preparation is one of the critical questions of preaching. And I think that if you don't have a method of preparation, it takes you longer to prepare.
Much.
So this is the argument that I make. People who have a consistent and steady method of preparation, their sermons tend to be steady and rising slowly as they get better and better.
Exactly.
When you have a weak preparation method, then you do this.
That's right.
The sermon is up here. Next week, the sermon is there. You can't figure out why. So I tell people to find a method. There are several methods of preparation. I have one. You have one. Samuel did with Proctor. Everybody's got one. The question is, can you find one that fits you, is comfortable to you, that you can stay with over a long period of time because you tweak it and you get better and better and better, and it shortens the preparation time for a sermon for a bivocational pastor.
That's right.
And the sermon is better when you get through.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So my sermon preparation, process is, pretty simple. We always start with prayer. What is your message? What do you want to get to the people? I'm starting with God. And then if I have a text and, I'm one of the people, I don't care whether you start in life experience and move to find the text, or you start the text and you move in life experience, or you're lectionary, or every Sunday you feel led by the whole, whatever. The sermon happens at the intersection of Bible and life.
Right.
So if you're on the Bible street, just keep going to life and it's going to intersect. If you're on the life street, keep rolling. It's at the intersection.
Yes, Lord.
Of Bible and life. And I don't care how you get there, you got to get to that intersection, right? So then Fred Craddock had an old technique. So if he would say, okay, you read the text, and if something speaks to you, you take out a sheet of paper. And so let's say you're preaching and Moses, take your shoes off, you're standing on holy ground, right? So the word shoes speak to you. He would suggest you take out a sheet of paper, put shoes in the middle, and then write whatever comes to your free association, whatever comes to your mind, just whatever. Don't block it, just put it. It may not go in the sermon, but it's in candidacy.
That's right.
Then after that, then I do my exegesis. Then I go to the commentaries. Then I'm trying to find out, can I put myself in the seat of the original hearer of the text? I do the exegetical work.
Right.
And then I have something called a preaching worksheet where I synthesize all of that by answering 5 or 6 questions. And then I come to a thesis statement, a purpose statement for the sermon. And following that, I begin to write. So I'm going to do that pretty consistently each time. Right. Sometimes I tweak it a little bit. Sometimes the exegesis is so exciting that I go back to the free association sheet, change the word, and put it. But I tell people, you can improve your preaching. I almost can say tremendously if you improve your method of preparation.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. We had the same, Fred Craddock was my professor.
Yes.
So, I have that sheet of paper.
Right.
With the shoes in the middle. And have had it for 30-something years. You're absolutely right. And you say, your thesis statement for me is my behavioral purpose.
Exactly. Mitchell. Yeah.
Right. Whatever your method is.
Right.
For God's sake, get a consistent method.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is what we did. We just finished a mixed method preaching conference, and we featured 3 methods. We featured a narrative method. We took Otis Moss Jr., let him preach a sermon. Then the next morning, he gets up and lectures on narrative preaching. We had a womanist preacher, Teresa Fry Brown. The next morning, she gets up and she lectures. Then we had Charlie Dates do expository preaching, and then he preached and then explained what it was, and then we put him in workshops with PhD students.
Okay.
The goal was to help them improve method, and method is preparation is a part of it. Well, how do you prepare? How do you pull this sermon together?
Right.
And I can't reemphasize this enough. This is worth the price of listening to this broadcast.
Thank you.
If you do not have a consistent method of preparation,
that's right.
The quality of your sermons will do this.
That's right.
You go up and down, and you can't figure why it's so good one week and last week, or you can't figure out why it's taking you 30 hours. I mean, it should take a substantial amount of time, but 30 hours is a long time for a sermon.
Right.
And then let me say this, and then I give it back to you. So this is how experienced preachers. So, they on Thursday, there's been a tragedy in the community, and the preacher goes to preach.
That's right.
On Friday, there's a funeral. The preachers got to preach. On Saturday night, they got to do their friend's anniversary banquet.
That's right.
And then on Sunday morning, they got to preach Sunday morning.
That's right.
So when you master sermon preparation, it shortens, and you can get all of that done. You can't take 30 hours and get through that.
That's right.
So I'll give it back to you, but those are my initial thoughts.
No, that's what we've told students forever. Please get a method.
Right.
Get a method and use it consistently. And I've even told students, it's okay if you change to a different method.
Exactly. It's
okay.
It is.
But follow a method.
Yes.
Follow a method, and don't fool yourself and think that you can do it one week and then say, well, no, next week I really didn't have time. You will go up and down, and you will blame it on a whole lot of things.
Yep, you certainly will.
A whole lot of things. Inconsistent preaching. I mean, it's consistently hear people blame it on everything from I don't know my voice yet to I don't have any self-confidence. And while all of those things may play a part, the biggest thing is you don't have a method that you use consistently. So I thank you for sharing that.
And stop watching the clothes on YouTube and stealing the clothes. If you prepare better, you have your own clothes.
Thank you.
So what we concentrate on is the delivery and the end. We don't say, if I get better in my preparation, I'll have my own clothes.
That's right. And people will be stealing your clothes from you too. Write the sermon. And the clothes. Write a sermon and a good close.
Right.
And so you're not pasting on anything. You're not just going to, okay, I think the sermon is finished. Ain't it all right?
Right. That's right. I
wish I had 5 people.
Right. Canned closes.
Exactly. Right. Not only are they canned, they have nothing to do with your sermon. It's like, okay. I said to a young man in class one day, he said, what if I get to finish with the body of the sermon and I have nothing left for the close? I said, I've seen that happen. I said, I've got a great recommendation. Say, thank God for the word and sit down. People will appreciate
yes, they do. They do.
Oh, and talking about methods, we go to something else that's a constant. And I'm glad you have sent me a list with a variety of tools that help make preachers better exegetes. Why do you think so many preachers are not great exegetes even after seminary?
I think that, let me give you the way that I do it. I say this in my seminary class. You can get away with a lot of sloppy preaching on the average congregation. And you may not be able to get away with it, but they'll certainly say nice sermon at the end of at the back of the church.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but what I'm trying to teach you is to preach so that your professors, I said, I was invited back to my seminary to preach, and all them people who taught me were sitting on that front row.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you get a higher, I don't mean better, but if that's your standard on an every week basis, you will not succumb to the tricks, the shortcuts,
That's right.
the cliches, so sometimes in class I asked her, I said, could you preach that at your mother's funeral? With that, and I don't mean maybe particularly that sermon, but the depth level that sermon is at. Mm-hmm. So, but when you aim for, a higher crowd, I remember when I preached in front of Gardner Calvin Taylor, it scared me to death. And I was miserable because he's just sitting there looking at me, and I'm like, he's sitting right, squarely in front of me, So I'm only been pastoring 5 years. So they invite me over to seminary. They didn't tell me that Gardner Calvin Taylor was coming to the doggone thing, right? So I mean, I don't remember what I said. I kept seeing him. I kept seeing his face, and he's nice sermon, young man. But I knew that wasn't a nice sermon. I knew it. But it's who sets the standard? And I mean, there are wise church people, but too often I've seen us cheapen it.
Yes.
I've seen us drop the level, dumb it down.
Yes.
To get a crowd.
Yes.
Thinking that we're going to get a crowd.
Yes.
And I say to people, I want to preach at the level so that when I preach my mother's funeral, I'm already preaching at that level every Sunday. There's no difference between that level and the level. That's what I'm, when I preach, I need a word. People need a word.
That's right.
And that canned stuff and that cheap stuff and that cliche stuff, you preach your mother's homegoing service, right? So that canned stuff ain't working. You got to say something. So why not say something every Sunday?
Yeah. So
you'll be ready for it.
Yeah. And I only had 3 days to write that sermon.
Right.
Because I planned 2 services, one in San Francisco and one in Chicago.
Right.
I had 3 days.
Right.
I had 3 days. But the method got me through the grief.
Exactly.
And just having 3 days.
Right.
And
you can't say your breakthrough is around the corner.
My God. Please.
Your miracle is about to happen.
Please. It's
your people look at you like you're crazy. Like what?
What? Mm-hmm.
We're looking for something that is able to look the grief squarely in the face and still have some hope.
That's right.
And if you have not been practicing that,
that's right,
on a weekly basis,
that's right.
When it comes time to deliver it, this is what I tell a student. I say, God's going to put you, now you can sleep through the preaching class, you can copy somebody else's sermon, but God's going to put you up in a place where you're going to wish that you'd have done a better job in preaching class.
My God.
I've seen it happen too many times.
Yeah. Well, I tend to try to look at preaching by someone, every week, because at this juncture, I'm more working with students on DMin projects and things like that. But I try to watch someone every week and during the week. And I'm just really saddened by how little exegesis you can clearly tell is going into text.
Right. So then that's a response as to why these folks are adopting expository preaching.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Because they're hearing so little of it that it's almost like, the national anthem at, most sporting events. Like, let's hurry up and get this out the way. You announce a text. Let's hurry up and get this out the way so we get on what we're really trying to say. And what we're really trying to say is not necessarily grounded in the text. So
Right.
the expositors come up and say the text, the text, the text, the text. So, Fred Price started, in the middle of the 80s. You remember that. He's walking up and down. He's got the Bible. He's opening the Bible. And people say, come to my church and saying, you ain't preaching the Bible. Because I ain't saying, because I am preaching the Bible. But, he's walking down in the front. Right. Everything he's saying is in the text. And never mind, he jumps whole entire context,
right.
in Hebrews. And, over in the Old Testament, then he'll jump to the New Testament.
And give you 5 scriptures trying to explain one.
Right. And I said this last night to a group of students that there is a long church history of that kind of preaching. So we can't just throw it away.
Right.
Except you being trained, I was saying to them, you're being trained in exegetics, you're being trained in, and don't look down on what other people are doing.
Right.
But at least be able to explain your own hope.
Right.
Explain what you're doing to somebody. And what exactly for me bothers me is it's so little text. It is so little text, little exegesis and text.
Well, I call it thin preaching. And I tell students, because as soon as you get a degree, if you say anything about someone else's preaching, you're looking down on their preaching. And you know me well enough to know that I love all styles of good preaching.
Yeah.
The issue is and should always be you're doing your best. And our job is to take whatever our foreparents did and see how we can improve upon it.
Right.
So it's okay if you walk down the aisle like Fred Price did, but you don't have to do 6 scriptures to explain one. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. I'm working with a boot camp now, a boot camp of 15 women. And I tell them all the time, because I've got some women who are evangelical and they love that. And I'll tell them, if you send me a sermon where you didn't stay in the text you chose and you went to 3 others, I am not grading that sermon. Stop it. Stop it.
I had that very discussion. Last night.
Yeah. But they do that roaming because they've not exegeted the one text they chose. That's what that roaming is about.
But you see what I'm saying?
Well, so you're trying to prove it with the help of the other word of God.
But see what I'm saying, but you can't dismiss that because of hundreds of years, that was the way the whole. So when they read, for example, he was bruised for our iniquities, instantaneously they go to Jesus. They don't stop in Isaiah's context. Right. They go, no, that's Jesus. Right. But that was the way that it was interpreted. So,
right.
I don't like to do that. I like to stay in the one text, explain the one text, and etc. Because I think that you're skipping context. You're missing the exegetical context to prove text to text, and then that's how we get some of this craziness with this prosperity stuff, where the wealth of the wicked has been stored up for the rich, and then you go over and all this crazy stuff. So I'm not saying all of it's good, but I'm trying to at least honor that this has been a method of interpretation for hundreds of years.
And it's a method that works. And I tell students, though, your job is to do it better.
Yeah, exactly.
Your job is to do it better. And to consider that the listening ear is listening differently now.
Right.
So, you have to consider that. Go ahead, Frank. You want to say?
I was just saying that, I think that when we did the anthology together, one of the things that I'll speak for me, and you can speak for you, of course, was that I learned what this tradition is all about and how varied and how this tradition has been passed on to us. And so here we are, we can come up and get up in 219 and think that we saying something new. When this text has been preached at least 2,000 years in the Christian church, at least 400 something years in the African American church.
That's right.
So we've been given this tradition, and we get people who get up who are ignorant of the tradition.
Yes.
So that was I know that I'm selling preaching with sacred fire, but to aware, and if you dig back through some of those sermons, I mean, them folk, they was saying some stuff.
My
I mean,
goodness, my goodness. I mean, and saying it under difficult circumstances.
yes,
Imagine some of those texts being written at a time when it was illegal for you to even be able to read.
right.
And they
Exactly.
did it anyway,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Or imagine a time when if word got out that you preached a sermon that said something about liberation, folk would come looking for you with ropes.
Right.
And they did it anyway.
Right.
And they did it anyway. So, I continue to tell preachers, please drench yourself in preaching, drench yourself in the history if you want to learn, want to do it well. Let me say something. Let me ask you a question about something else that preachers are wrestling with now. And that's the whole notion of postmodernism, or some people have called it a post-truth age. I'm not sure what that is,
Yeah.
but I've heard that terminology. So what you are saying to listeners as a preacher? What are you saying to students about, I guess, the postmodern age, and considering it as they're doing sermon preparation?
I don't care whether we're in modern, postmodern, Greek, Roman, African. There are some things that are eternal.
Thank you.
And so we phrase it that a lie can't live forever.
Thank you.
That we can find biblical language for that. There are certain things that are good and just and right and true. And I don't care who's not doing them.
That's right.
I have the faith that honesty is going to win at the end. Now, there's plenty of evidence. I mean, it can look dark in the middle. I mean, I will grant that. Lord. And so I think for me, what's been so difficult in this, for what I call post-truth, where I can have my truth and you can have your truth, and I can make up my set of facts and you can have your set of facts, that there are still some things that a lie is a lie
is a lie.
All day long, a lie is a lie. You can dress it up. You can get a PR firm, win elections. You can do whatever you want. A lie, and the old folks used to say, right? They say stuff like, if you lie, you'll steal, right? I mean, right, yeah. Right? My grandpa used to say to me all the time, he said, if you lie, then you'll steal. I mean, so there are these proverbs of truth that have rung true for generation upon generation upon generation, that you can get away. Let me take the biblical text. Weeping may endure for a night, joy comes in the morning. Or Fred Sampson used to always say, what's his Psalm 1? The wicked, they shall soon be cut off. There are these eternal truths, and God and justice and mercy and compassion. God and Taylor used to say that, please and thank you and may I will take you farther than money and degrees.
Amen.
So you can flaunt money and degrees all you want, but you ain't gonna, what's his other thing? Like, you can fool some of the people some of the time. But
you can't fool all the people.
Right. So
all the time.
So get up and tell the people the truth.
Tell them the truth.
I mean,
tell the truth.
So that's how I look at it. What's true, or in postmodern world, let's say, well, what's true for you? Well, I can explain. I can articulate my hope, and that's what theology and training and reading and studying and going to classes, because I think you should be able to articulate your truth.
That's right. That's right. And you should be able to do it even. I remember early on when I started preaching, and I was, in my 20s, and of course, an older preacher who didn't particularly want women preaching. He started to ask me all of these questions about the Bible and text and etc. And I said to him, sir, I can't answer most of your questions, but I said, I'm starting at this point, and I'll get to the rest of it
Mm-hmm.
by and by. I said, I start right here.
Right.
Jesus loves me, this I know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Bible tells me so. I said, and the rest of it, I'll get by and by, by and by. And so, of course, if you live long enough, you get to say, see. So after we started the African American pulpit, of course, ran into, that preacher. And he said, oh, what are you working on? I said, this is some of the getting by and by that I mentioned to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so even at an early age, you've got to know the basic truth of who you are. I didn't need anybody to tell me at 20, say please and say thank you. My mama taught me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need anybody early on to tell me that the company you keep matters, how you treat people matters. Okay.
Yes.
And that God will be God.
Right.
No matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm just wondering, preachers, when you got preachers blessing political leaders who are liars, just liars.
Yeah.
What do preachers do with that? I know the people are having a heck of a time, but I'm seeing preachers struggling with that.
I reread Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited.
Oh my goodness!
I recommend that to absolutely
yes, Lord.
And he sets forth strategy of how the disinherited people, he says, whose backs are against the wall, can overcome and have hope. And one of the things that he says that I almost hate to say this on Facebook because Negro's gonna steal this, and I ain't worked it into a sermon yet. So I offer it in, because
they'll steal it and call it borrowing. Go ahead and say it anyway.
He calls it a devastating sincerity.
Yes, Lord.
He says, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
A devastating. I know this book.
That's what he said.
I know this book. Yes.
And so I'm working on this sermon with that text. Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Mm-hmm. Which means don't trifle, don't, equivocate. Your yes should be yes and your no should be no. It's called he calls it a strategy. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. And I read that. I've been reading that for 3 weeks. I keep on like devastating sincerity. And I got my notes, so I'm trying to work my little message up. Yeah. But I think that in these times, people need a very clear and simple. I read this too. That truth is deep and simple, and lies are shallow and complex.
And hey. That was my Church of God in Christ voice.
Lies are shallow and complex.
Shallow and complex. All right now.
So when he says, if you won't work, you'll steal. It is true and simple. It's deep and simple. That's and right. I say to people, just come to the deep and simple truth. A lie is a lie.
A lie is a lie.
Truth is and how you treat people. Please and may I and thank you. All of this justice and mercy and compassion and forgiveness and love. These are simple. I know they're complex in the relationships, but they're simple things in comparison to the work that you have to do to pull the wool over people's eyes.
That's right. That's right.
So bring deep and simple truth to people.
Bring the truth. Bring the truth to the people, no matter what's going on around you.
Right.
Bring the truth to the people. I tell students from time to time, even if you're not getting all of those engagements.
Or amens too, by the way.
Or amens. That's right.
Right.
Just tell the truth.
Right.
Just tell the truth.
So one of the things out of our relationship that, I'll never forget, I say this to young preachers and I quote your name when you say it. And I the way that I phrase it, I paraphrase what you said, but, it takes time to build a life. Mm-hmm. And so what you have to do is do good work.
That's it.
Across time. And don't worry about, the person that that you look up to, y'all peers, and their church is like this, and your little church ain't doing that. No, no. Do quality work
Do the work.
across time.
Cross time. Stick
And
with
God,
something.
right, and God will put you. Now, you said that to me. I'm paraphrasing back to you what you said to
Mhm.
me, and so people, for whatever, my little resume and all that kind of stuff, people look at my life, da da da, and I said it's very, very simple. Do
Mm.
quality work. Do what the old folks say. Do a good day's work for a good day's pay.
Yes, yes.
Offer people the very best of your service.
Mhm.
And I promise you, God sees that. I promise you, God sees it and will put you in some places
Mhm.
that you never imagined that you'd be.
Never imagine, because God rewards faithfulness.
Yes, yes, yes,
God rewards faithfulness.
yes.
I mean, an eighth grade teacher, Maddie Reed, told me this, and it has blessed me my entire life. When I had nothing, because we
Mhm.
were pretty close to being in poverty, but when I was in the eighth grade, but she just said, learn to do good work
Hmm.
and do it all of your life, and that will take care of you.
Right,
That will take care of you. And then, of course, added to that over time, I learned that that's what God really wants from us. It's faithfulness
right,
for whatever we do, whether
right,
we're preachers, lawyers, bookkeepers, garbage collectors, whatever you do.
right,
God wants your faithfulness to God and how you live that out through relationships and what you do in life. Um, and so it works. It really works in ministry.
right.
Just do good work over time and don't worry about what didn't happen for you that happened
Exactly,
for somebody else.
exactly, exactly.
You
Because
cannot.
God's got something for you,
Absolutely.
and if you just go ahead and do your work, and not all
Yeah.
this other stuff. So it's like bring the people simple truth. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this old folk wisdom.
Mm.
You can't, you know, what they used to say to us, and that it wasn't long, it wasn't deep philosophical. They couldn't
Right.
quote Aristotle. They never heard of Immanuel Kant,
That's right.
but they had folk wisdom and
Mm.
common sense. My father's like that. My father, I think he's a high school graduate, but
Mm-hmm.
just common sense. So
Right.
he said to me when I first started pastoring, he said two things to me. He said, number one, you work for free because I had a
Mm.
job.
Mm.
He said, but make them pay you.
Mm.
And even if you give them the check back,
Mm-hmm.
make them pay you.
Make them pay you. That's
So
it.
I gave them one check back before my
Mm-hmm.
wife said, what are we doing with these checks? We are
Mm.
not giving these checks back. Folk wisdom. And then he said to me, he said, nothing is worth your health.
Nothing. Yes, Lord.
He said, your health is your most valuable commodity. He said, you can serve, you can fly, you can preach, you can teach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only going to ask you, how's your health?
My God.
So, I mean, that kind of,
Yeah.
that's grounded deep. So he said, God wouldn't have you sick and broken down. I mean, but bring people simple, deep truth.
Yeah. It's the wisdom of the ancestors.
Yes,
It still works.
right,
It still works. It sounded crazy when we were in our 20s, but we kept on living.
right.
We kept on. It's the wisdom of the ancestors. Let me close with a kind of twofold thing.
Okay.
Uh, Number one, tell me a bit about how the PhD program is going. We are excited that you did all the heavy lifting to get the first one started. I remember when it was your dream,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and I listened to you talk about it 100 times,
Yeah,
and you never stopped working on it
right.
and brought it to fruition. So I want you to say on behalf of a grateful village, we are proud
Thank you.
that you are doing it. We are proud that you did it. And then you know me, I'm gonna ask the tough question too.
Right. Okay.
I'm looking at some of the people who have gone into the program, and some of them, of course, are well known, and
Right.
they're older,
Right.
They're 50 plus, and many have large churches. Is it your expectation that these individuals will complete the program right and contribute to the field?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me tell you why. I think a couple things.
Hmm.
My first response is what Henry Mitchell told me one time about the King Fellows,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is there were big names in the group, and he said they had somebody named James Forbes that nobody had ever heard of.
That's right.
So he told me
Yeah.
James Forbes outdistanced most of them.
Yep.
So you never know when you get a group of people who's who and what's what. That's the
That's
first
right.
thing. So
That's right.
I got students. So that some of them got mega churches, some of them got portfolios, but in this classroom, all of us are students. And you
Hmm.
never know. I got some people in that you ain't never heard of. I got somebody doing a dissertation on the preaching of Howard Thurman. His name is Justin West. I got some people in there that you've never heard of
Hmm.
who are absolutely gonna make a huge difference. That's
And you
that's
got one of my kids, so I know he's
right,
gonna.
right. So notoriety.
Yeah.
Second thing
Hmm.
that I think about is, as you know, there's a whole lot of people who can say it
Hmm.
but can't explain to anybody else what they're doing.
That's right.
So my analogy, just thinking about it like this, just kind of brainstorming it. Grandmama never wrote a recipe down,
Hmm.
so she'd take a pinch of this and a pinch of this and a pinch of that and pinch of that, and you were sitting there on the stool.
Hmm.
So you would lick the bowl, like we used to do, and then when you got ready to do it, because you had watched her do a pinch of this and a pinch of that, pinch of this, pinch of that. But that's because we had proximity. Negroes that don't have proximity need a recipe.
Thank you.
So,
Oh. You got that was a word now.
right. So if you are watching Gardner Calvin Taylor
Hmm.
and you take a pinch of this and a pinch of that, and you're not really close enough,
Yeah.
right, to take a pinch of this, a pinch of that, because you don't have closeness,
Hmm.
you need for Gardner to be able to explain to you what he's doing,
Right.
his method,
Right.
right? And a
Right.
lot of these preachers, because as you know, it takes training to understand your method.
That's right.
But the issue is that you can't leave it. People will marvel that you're a great preacher,
Hmm.
but they won't be able to do what you do
That's right.
because they don't have a recipe.
That's right.
So what we do is train people to be able to recognize the recipe
Hmm.
and then go and explain it to other people. So I've had Gina Stewart. I'll just call. I think she'd be okay. I just call her name. We were doing the reading. I said, Gina, just stay with it. Stay with it. And
Hmm.
so she called me on a Saturday morning. She was in tears and shouting all over the phone. She said, Frank, I preached last night, and a group of women asked me to come together on Saturday morning. You know, the first question they asked me the question you told me that they were going to ask me.
How you do what you do.
How do you do what you do?
Hmm.
And she said, I explained it to them. Bang, step, bang, bang, bang.
Hmm.
And she said, I saw the faces light up,
Yeah.
and it was approachable, and it was that I might could do some of that, or I might could practice, or
That's right.
I could adopt your method. So what we're doing really is helping people to get the language to explain what they're doing
All
so
right.
you can improve the preaching of other people. That's a whole long explanation. But
Hmm.
ultimately, we have a lot of genius that goes to the grave with black preachers,
Yes.
as you know, because they can do it,
Can't explain it.
but they can't explain it.
Can't explain it.
So I can marvel at what you're doing and be blessed by it. At another level, I want to know, can you give me the recipe?
Yes. Yes.
And
Most
so
of them don't have a recipe. They have a pinch of this and a pinch of that,
exactly,
and it comes out great for them because
exactly,
they've been baking that cake for so long. They're so
exactly.
long. So I'm excited about the program and what you have people doing, and I just can't wait for even some of the people in your program who are well known to
Hmm.
talk about their own method.
Right,
To talk about their own method. That's big
right.
that you have people doing that. And I wish more senior pastors would do that for the preachers who work with them, instead of just saying, watch me.
Exactly. But what you have to do is you have to come down and study, so you have to go and become a student. So when I'm grading papers, it's wonderful that you're the pastor of this church or that church or this church or that church. It's wonderful you got a speaking itinerary. It's wonderful that you're this and you're that. But on this paper, on this day, I need this.
You better be there. You better be there.
So they have submitted themselves to teaching and submitted themselves to being taught, which is a great gift.
Good.
And I think that the submission of themselves to being taught only expands their ministry at whatever level it is.
That's right.
Versus, somehow it, or you got to be embarrassed that you don't know it. No, you don't have to be embarrassed. This is a whole new field.
That's right.
It's a whole different way of thinking.
That's right.
It's like, just get in here. And so I'm excited too. I think we're going to do some profound things. We've got a group. The first group is coming into comprehensive exams right now.
Okay.
So they're about 3 years into the program, halfway. And we got another group that's starting in January. So, but we keep going. And I thank you for your support, and thank you, everybody. It's I have gotten so much support, and there has been a lot of it has been such a pride that what was once considered buffoonery and ignorance could rise to the level of a PhD program, a terminal degree.
Yeah. And we knew it. We knew it. We knew it when we were in our 20s and 30s. We knew it from the pulpit. We knew it from there. We knew it.
Right.
We knew it. But I thank God that you did the work.
Yeah.
You did the work along with some folk helping you. But you did the work. Mm-hmm. You did the work. And so I thank God that has been added to your legacy.
Thank you so much for that.
Because that's a lot of heavy lifting from ATS to figuring out money, to just figuring out approaches, to figuring out how to work with busy students and not doing the typical route towards the PhD, which I think is outdated, long outdated.
Right.
And I think and students eventually, and I think sooner rather than later, are going to let schools know, okay, yeah, you all can keep doing that. Let's see how many people are going to pay for that and take time and in that. I've never believed that you should have to give up your whole life to do a degree. Right. Although, we both, went through that steps. I've never believed that was the best way to teach people and to get them to add to the field. Let me close with this. Tell me what you're working on, what you're writing.
I did a book called How to Preach a Dangerous Sermon, and
I bought that.
I have a sequel coming in April called How to Survive a Dangerous Sermon.
All right now. Okay.
How do you survive it?
When they put you out your church, you mean?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what I mean. So it's coming in April 2020.
Okay.
So it's part of a series that I'm working on, How to Preach a Dangerous Sermon, How to Survive a Dangerous Sermon, or Surviving a Dangerous Sermon. And then the last one is going to be called The God of the Dangerous Sermon.
All right now. Okay.
Because, you have to believe in a when them folk marched in front of them dogs and hoses, they believe in a God, a dangerous God. That said something about. So I'm just beginning to write that. I did a lecture. I wrote a lecture on 400 years of African American preaching. What do these words mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm working on the question of power. Or what's the ultimate power, the God of the dangerous sermon. So I think that'll be a year from now. That'll be 2021, maybe, by the time I get it all finished. And part of that, I'm also working on, I told you this, when we talked the other day, the difference between preaching the Bible and preaching the gospel. And just because you're preaching the Bible don't mean you're preaching the gospel.
Say some more about that. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that one of the things that is very difficult for us to admit is that there are several gospels. And I know we know that there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But what I mean by that is when you look at Peter, Peter had a Jewish gospel. Paul had a Gentile gospel.
That's right.
Right? So we all go around, throw around the word gospel. So when I think of the person, the people who are supporting political leadership, who are throwing Christian terms around, and you know, God did this, and God, you know, this person is God's person, and all this stuff going on ain't got nothing to do with God. Then I say we're not preaching the same gospel.
That's right.
We're preaching a different gospel.
That's right.
So let's own up to that. And then my job is to articulate the gospel that I am preaching. And if I want to dialogue with you, then to learn some of the gospel that you're preaching, because we are not all, I know this, see, you know, this is heretical in some circles. There's only one gospel. Yeah, but if you look at the New Testament very closely, they had to have a church conference around the different gospels.
That's right.
You know, to try to come together on because Peter had interpretation. And so it's like we're scared of that because the Bible is true. And if it's, you know, there's all these gospels and, you know, one word of it's not true, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And for my sense, what I'm believing is that all of us start in different social locations, and our social locations affect the gospel that we see and preach.
Absolutely.
So let's be honest about that.
Please.
And stop pretending like our gospel is the only gospel.
That's right.
So you jump up,
especially when you've not even looked to see if there are other gospels.
Exactly. But you know, you'll say the social gospel is heresy.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. You know, it's been life-giving to millions of people.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, that's the only gospel they could believe in based upon their social location.
Exactly.
So anyway, I'm trying to, a piece of that will be in surviving the dangerous sermon, but
wonderful. Okay.
So
yeah, well, I definitely will be looking for another one, and I appreciate that work that you are doing with students, and that you've had a ministry of teaching that spanned almost 3 decades now. Isn't that something? And that's commendable. And I believe, like me, that was your first ministry.
Yeah.
That was your first ministry, and that you'll always do it. No matter what we do in between, I think somehow we circle back to our first ministry. And so I want to thank you for just being faithful to that ministry, to training people to write, to doing the writing. Just want to thank you for it. You want to hold up something?
Yeah, you know, we did so much talking, and I did a bad thing, which is to cut off to appreciate the thank you that you're giving me, because it has been a lot of work. And so and you know, I say this about us as pastors and preachers, we're so busy that we don't take time to receive when somebody says thank you to you.
That's right.
You know, we can't receive the appreciation, you know, and we'll do the obligatory stuff, but to let it sink in. So I broke the rule that I'm working on in my own life, to stop long enough that when somebody appreciates you, to receive it and be blessed by it versus.
So tell me what you were trying to hold up.
We were talking about methods. So I was trying to hold up a method workbook. If anybody was interested, this is Preaching at Celebration. It's a workbook, and go up on it. And because I think that having a method is one of the keys to the kingdom of wonderful preaching. And if you don't, you get, like, I listened to them for an hour. I don't know what they were talking about. Well, this is what we were talking about. Get a method so you can get consistent about your preaching. That's what.
No. They're gonna say they're not gonna say I listened to. They're not gonna say they listened to us and they didn't know what we were talking about. We were clear. we were clear about a whole lot of stuff. We weren't trying to get everybody to agree, but we were definitely clear. Frank Thomas, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to do this. I mean, people can tell just from your listing the things you're working on, how busy your life is and has always been. And now you're doing granddad duty
Oh, yeah.
And that's going into your schedule. Oh yeah, and I've been watching you. I know you're going for that I'm the ultimate grandfather prize, and you're winning, and you're winning. But all of that, I am just very appreciative
Thank you.
that you would take the time to share with me and to folk who listen to the broadcast. And as always, let me say to everyone who's going to watch the sessions today, and that will be thousands and thousands of people, share the video. It won't cost you anything. If this helped you, if 5 minutes of it helped you, it will help someone else. It will help some young preacher. Will help someone who's discerning their call. It will help someone who is down and out because they really don't believe that their preaching is moving forward. It will help people who are confused about truth. Share the video. God bless you.
God bless you,
Thank you again, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons.
Brothers and sisters, have a great week. And I haven't decided yet if I'm coming on next Monday or if I'm going to take some time off. But I'll let you know. Yeah. I'm thinking real hard about that. Take some time off. God bless everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Bye, Frank.
Bye.